This is the Microcast from Microcosm Coaching. We encourage athletes of all ages, backgrounds, and ability levels to take small steps towards big dreams. Start small, dream big, and get matched today with a Microcosm coach by scheduling a free consultation call. Whether you're running your first 5K or 10th 100 miler, our team of certified coaches can help you reach your athletic goals. Visit us at microcosm-coaching.com to learn more and take a small step towards your big dreams today. Hello, hello.
Welcome back.
Happy Monday morning to you.
Here we are.
We're back again. Rest day Monday. You're resting today.
I am.
Because you are racing this weekend.
I know.
Tell the folks what you're running.
I'm running the Silver Rush 50-mile race in Leadville, Colorado.
So I'm excited to talk a little bit about that. As per usual, we're going to do some hot or nots. We're going to talk a little bit about your race at Leadville this weekend, because you're running it as a B race, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk a little bit about how folks can integrate B races or like focused efforts, focused long runs, whatever you want to call it, into their race calendar. And then we're going to spend the bulk of today talking about the 5 worst myths that hold runners back. Like, as coaches, these are the 5 things that we see over and over again that are essentially what prevent people from getting faster and fitter.
Yes, I can't wait to get into that. I think there's going to be some great takeaways for all the
Yeah.
folks there. But also, I'm kind of recognizing that I need a little bit of a warm-up here. So we've got some hot or not from the community.
Absolutely. But, before we get too deep into it, we did want to promo that we have roster spots available. So if you are looking for a coach, reach out. You can book a consultation call at our website, microcosm-coaching.com. And this is just like a low pressure way, just like, let's chat on the phone for like half an hour, 45 minutes and see if you're a match. I always view getting to know your coach kind of like dating, and we're sort of mutually interviewing each other to see if we're a match. So it's really like no pressure. Let's just see where we're at, what you want, what we can provide. But I think that's a really, really good place to start, because whether or not folks end up deciding to work with us, I think it's really important, A, ideally they interview a couple different coaches,
Definitely.
and B, that people really find the person that's a fit for them.
Absolutely.
So check that out on our website. And if you're sort of looking to dip a toe in, you can join our Foothills tier, which is sort of like coaching light.
Yeah.
Where you can join our community. You get access to our twice a month coaching roundtables where you get to ask coaches questions. You can get feedback on your training. So if you're not like totally sure if coaching is for you, I think this is a really great way to get a sense of what working with us is like in a super like low cost, low risk way. And you can sign up for that at our website as well, microcosm-coaching.com. And yeah, join the Foothills tier. And if you use the code Foothills10, it's only $10 a month. So it's sort of like having a coach in your pocket for just $10.
Yeah, it's awesome. And you got the community behind you. And we have some hot or not questions, topics from our community of athletes. So this is stuff that was going on and being discussed on the Slack channel this past week.
Yeah.
That we grabbed for the podcast. So let's start it off with the classic hot or not.
I feel like we've done this one 9 times.
Yeah, but I don't know if we've done it in the last 6 months. So we've got a lot of new listeners. We should do this one
every 6 months.
We have a lot of new listeners out there, both on the podcast and over on YouTube. Just a reminder to please like, subscribe, comment wherever you're listening to this. Helps us build out the community and get this information to the masses.
I think a lot more evidence-based messaging out there. Like, I think that a big part of what we try to do is be a little bit of like a balm against like influencer culture,
right? Where
a lot of folks are sort of riding the wave of like the algorithm and like, being hot and not sharing science. We're going to keep our shirts on and cite robust peer-reviewed evidence.
We will not be using heat suits on this podcast today.
No heat suits. Yeah. Shirts on, heat suits off. But yeah, what's your take, TJ? Normatec compression pants.
Okay, so here's my take. Scientifically speaking, evidence from an evidence perspective, not hot.
Yeah.
I think from an anecdotal N of 1 place, this could potentially be hot. If you've got extra cash to burn And if you're not already maximizing the big recovery percentages, like making sure that you're eating well, sleeping well, staying hydrated, those being the big things, having a polarized training plan where you have days that are hard and days that are very, very easy. I think the cool thing about these compression pants is they feel nice for some people. And they also force people to get on their couch and rest. But there's just not a lot of evidence to support like compression being like that the pants are actually like doing anything to enhance recovery.
Correct. There's no studies that show that these improve recovery. Like there are studies that show that they improve how well people perceive they're recovering, but again, a lot of that can be attributed to the placebo effect. So these like compression pants, the ones that like squeeze your legs, these were originally invented for diabetes patients who struggle with circulation in their lower extremities, and a lot of them have limited mobility. So the idea behind these pants is like, how do we increase circulation for people who are mobility limited? The thing with runners is like, increasing circulation can be a really positive sort of recovery thing, but you can also get that via doing a 10-minute easy walk with your dog,
seriously.
Or even just putting your legs up the wall to sort of like drain the blood out.
I'm not sure how much Normatec pants, compression boots, whatever you want to call them, cost these days. But I'm pretty
like
sure
several $100s.
Pretty sure putting your legs up the wall is a lot cheaper than that.
Yeah. I mean, and like again, in the research, when there are measurable benefits from these recovery interventions, a lot of times it just comes from forcing someone to sit on the couch. If you're someone who feels like you need to pay to sit on the couch, maybe just get a Hulu subscription. It's like $12 a month, watch The Bear. Boom, you're done. You're welcome. Yeah, this is something that I would put really, really low on your hierarchy of needs. We have a pair that we got for free and we'll occasionally bust them out.
Yeah.
But again, I think it feels as good as putting my legs up the wall. And this is not something I would recommend people spend their money on. I think that like, sometimes in the space there can be this like, oh, what's the harm? And like, if it doesn't hurt you, like, I don't know, why not spend money on it? I think that's not how I like to live my life. I don't encourage people to spend money on things unless there like is a demonstrable benefit. I think that, if you want to get the placebo effect from something, like again, watch The Bear, like find a cheaper way to get that mental benefit. Yeah. So I'm going to say not hot.
Okay.
I would not spend money on these. I would not recommend other people do that.
How about ankle length socks? Hot or not? This was hotly contested in the Slack channel this week.
When we say ankle length, is that like below the ankle bone?
Yes.
No. Yeah, I'm out.
You're out?
I do. I'm a quarter crew girl for life. So I need
quarter crew.
Yeah. So I don't do the full crew. That's like way too much sock for me. I do the quarter crew because I do want it to go up and over my ankle bone.
I think having that low sock is a disaster. Not only are you probably going to get some rocks in your sock, you could rub your ankles against your shoes. Your whole ankle is so exposed to the elements if you're a trail runner.
I
don't like that. It's a lot of ankle.
Yeah, this really comes down to personal preference. You use crew socks. You also have the world's most atrocious crew sock tan. Like, it is truly hard to live with that next to me every night. Your feet look like necrotic. They are so white. They look like an albino weasel skin. They've never seen
their feet.
No one, but like occasionally I'll go out in the world without socks actively on so that my flesh looks like it belongs to a living human.
I just don't need to get a sunburn on my feet. I got shoes on there.
But like if you just every so often like microdose sun.
Nope.
Okay. I like to, I have a sock tan, but like you look like you were dipped upside down in candle wax.
I've been wearing ankle high socks.
Crew socks.
Crew socks. Is that's the technical term for this? Crew socks since I was 11 years old.
And it looks like your feet have not seen the sun since you turned 11.
I have had that sock tan for at least 2 decades. And I love it personally. I think it's a sign that I get out there and I do the work and I wear the proper length sock.
So like when we go out of the house, what you wear in the summer is you wear like jorts with high socks.
Are we going to do this
and
again?
Hoka recovery slide. I just need people to understand.
Okay. Everyone knows I do not wear slides outside of the house.
You do wear slides. I've seen you in slides out of the house.
No, you never have.
And the Birkenstocks with socks.
Oh yeah, Birkenstocks for sure.
With socks?
Yeah.
Oh
keep
God.
the feet happy.
It's hideous. Yes. I can't.
Yes.
I can't.
That's an East Coast. That's an East Coast athlete.
That's not an East Coast athlete. That is like a grandpa thing. That is like grandpa and like tourists in Berlin thing.
You know what? I'm happy. I'm healthy.
I'm glad that you have a strong self-concept.
Listen, my Birkenstock and sock people out there, I know they're listening to this and they support.
Yeah, well, shout out to you guys. Hope celibacy is working out for you.
So we're not hot on those short little
all
socks.
of that is to say, put on normal socks.
It's a no-go.
But also you do you. You know, this is like, that's really personal preference. But
there's no scientific studies to back up
I did not. I didn't get on PubMed to see if ankle socks have been researched.
Okay, well, here's something that might be on PubMed. Mandatory gear for ultras, like maybe the UTMB mandatory kits that they make athletes use and that they check at packet pickup and will penalize you for not having, hot or not.
I think it depends on the gear. I think that like requiring people to carry a rain jacket, like that's fine to me, and a headlamp, like those things make sense. I think what I bump on is when like when I did the UTMB race in Mexico, they made us carry a bowl, a fork, and gaiters, which like,
wow.
I had no intention of using any of those things. Like if I am sitting down to eat food out of a bowl with silverware, at that point I'm no longer competing in a competition. Like at that point I am at a fucking barbecue.
A fork and knife, cutlery?
We didn't have to
cutlery.
It said hot. Cutlery on the list.
Not hot.
So that was a bizarre translation.
Sitting down to have your stromboli, your sausage.
I mean, they had like corn salad at the aid stations. God bless anyone who sat down and ate corn salad in the middle of the like UTMB Puerto Vallarta race. Godspeed to your GI system. I think it really depends on the gear. I think that like it is a good idea to require people to bring things that make sense, because a lot of times unless people are required, they simply won't. Like I won't. But if you require me, I will. I do think that sometimes races go a little bit overboard, and then it makes it hard to trust those things, because like when you have to carry something like gaiters, which is like not a safety thing, that's when I start to be like, well, now I'm doubting this, like that I actually need this rain jacket or this safety blanket.
Right.
Like that just makes me feel like you're making me carry stuff regardless of it like meaningfully improving either the running experience or runner safety or like protecting race liability.
I do think that there is liability reasons why they mandate this stuff.
That stuff makes sense, but the gaiters and the silverware, fuck right off.
But you don't want to get little scorpions in your shoes.
My God, the scorpions at that. I mean, but again, like at no point where there's like, there were definitely scorpions out there, but gaiters aren't going to be the only thing standing between me and imminent scorpion induced death. So I'm like 50-50. I think, again, I think especially sometimes the UTMB or like sometimes European, particularly international. In America, we're just like, yeah, if you die, you die, whatever. Sorry, guys. Should have brought a jacket.
I honestly, I think that mandatory gear is hot, as annoying as it is, and everyone.
I think it depends on the gear.
Everyone complains
I'm still
about
salty about the gaiters.
You just need to get over it.
No, I bought gaiters that I had no intention of using, and I carried them around, basically like emotional support gaiters for like 8 hours. That is silly.
I get that
it actually becomes like less safe if you're making people carry things they will not use.
I don't agree with that. I think that's a nice opinion to have, but in the end, these races
it makes people lose trust.
Sure, these races won't be able to happen if there isn't mandatory gear requirements. And so therefore, whether we like it or not, if we want to participate in these events, we have to use
yes, but I think that like
and it will
an adult who has run an ultra should be the person that decides the gear. Because if you're telling me to like bring a picnic set and like a wine uncorking thing and a lock of Killian Jornet's hair, then I start to lose I think that you're just you're like making shit up.
How many times have you coached somebody who is unprepared for one aspect or another of their race?
Yes, but again, I think that it's not a big ask to ask races to make a list that actually makes sense given the demands of their event. Like if I'm running, you know, a hot race, telling me to bring it, like at the race in Mexico, originally they had a puffy coat listed on the thing. And so like I went to packet pickup and I was like, dog, it is 90 degrees. Like there is no fucking way I am carrying a puffy coat into the jungle of Mexico.
Well,
it is
Zoe,
October.
what they do, what the flaw is that they have two different kits for every race. They have a cold weather kit, and then they have a kit that's mandatory if the conditions are, you know, normal. And then they announce the day before what kit to use. And I do think that creates a lot of anxiety, like it did for you and athletes. Do I have to carry all this stuff? Do I have to go buy extra shit that's like small and lightweight?
And I did that. I spent a lot of money on gear.
And it's annoying.
I had no intention of using. I have never used. It is now rotting in the back of our nutrition closet. I think that is so dumb. I will never get over it. I think I am still angry thinking about it.
I think you're an American through and through is what I hear. You should not race European races.
I am okay to bring required gear that like makes sense to use. But a bowl, fuck off. A puffy coat in the jungle? There is not a single day of the year that you will wear a puffy coat in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Like, just write a list that makes sense.
I don't know. Maybe there is a time and a place where it gets cold there. I'm not sure. But anyways, you heard it here first. We have a hot and we have a not hot on this one.
I think you're wrong. I think you can carry my gear then for my next race. How about that?
Well, then you would get a time penalty.
I would say that the thing here is like, yeah, like don't try to cut corners on gear if you are required to carry. Like they're like, especially on stuff that you have like a reasonable chance of using, like don't get cute, like have the backup headlamp, you know, like have a nice rain jacket and practice running with your required gear in your vest. Because if like the first time you put on your full vest, your full pack is on race day, that's not going to feel too good.
Nope.
Like, especially for these longer UTMB races where you do have to carry a good bit of stuff, I would definitely in like the 8 to 10 weeks before your race be practicing with that and be honing your race day kit.
Yes. Love that.
Fuck you, UTMB Mexico.
Love some takeaways there. All right.
I still have those gaiters. I spent like $40 on them.
You know what? And they'll be great for when you do hard rock in a few years.
I will never wear gaiters.
Never wear gaiters. I could see them being practical.
I would rather be repeatedly stung around my ankles by scorpions than ever be caught in gaiters. I will accept death before gaiters.
You know those Prodigio Pros that you wear have built-in gaiters.
Yeah, but that's like a sensible, like low gaiter.
It's not like
the fucking like the I plan on walking every step of this race like gaiter of
I'd
2012.
Like to see you in fishing waders out there. Those should be new required gear for you, Zoe.
Yeah. Oh my God. UTMB Mexico, wear your fishing gaiters.
All right, let's segue over here before we go too deep down the rabbit hole of gaiters, hot or not.
I'm flushed thinking about that. I'm so
triggered your nervous system.
It is so dumb to make it is like genuinely it makes people less safe. It does. That's my take.
Okay, that's an interesting take. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to take that bait on that take. Let's move into why do we do B races? What's the point of incorporating B races into your yearly race calendar? What am I doing to prepare for my B race? What do we recommend our athletes do?
So could you sort of define a B race in the way that you think about it with your athletes?
Yeah. So B race is a race that you do in support of your A race or your main race for a certain period in the calendar year. So my main race is Run Rabbit Run. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to do a long-ish, I guess, race, 50 miles in preparation for that race. It's about, I don't know exactly, maybe 8 to 10 weeks out, somewhere in that range, which is pretty good for a 50 mile or 100K, depending on what level of athlete you are. But it can start to really take the place of like a boot camp or a training camp weekend.
So it's like a big concentrated stress, which can be
Exactly.
super productive for folks.
Yeah, and I think for a few reasons, right? Like one, we want to test out our nutrition
Yep.
in
Well,
situations.
yes, we want to test it out. Like, especially like if you're, if you're training for a 100 or a 100K, racing a 50K or a 50 miler will enable you to test your nutrition for a longer period of time and under more stress than you reasonably would in training. But again, I am just a coach standing in front of everyone on the internet telling them to please practice your nutrition on all your long runs. If you're
Right.
only practicing it in like the 2 months before your race, that is not enough.
Yeah, and that's, I think it's like it's a way to really trial what you've already been doing
Yeah.
and put it through the ringer to see where the gaps are.
Yep.
Does this really work? Does it not work? Same thing with your mental preparation and your mental strategies. Same thing with race execution and race strategies. Same thing with process oriented goals. You can kind of just go down that checklist.
Yeah.
And this is like a big rehearsal to go out there and do those things repeated over and over, for me, for more than 6 hours, hopefully less than 7, and get a stress that otherwise I wouldn't be getting in training.
Yeah. So I'm curious what your approach to Silver Rush is, knowing that like this is not like your whole season is not oriented around doing well at this event. I'm curious, like, what is your approach to this race and how do you advise athletes approach their B races from like a pacing and like intensity and like mental focus standpoint?
Yeah, so I think that it's important to recognize, like, I try to do the same things that I recommend my athletes do. So, like, how does a B race function? It's not something we're going to necessarily train very specifically
Yeah.
for. Ideally, it's a race that's somewhat related to your A race. In this case, my race is only slightly related, actually, to the race that I'm doing.
When you say related, can you describe what that means?
Terrain,
Mm-hmm.
technicality,
Yep.
elevation,
Yep.
um,
Like altitude?
yes,
Yeah.
altitude, like those things. Some
And how
similarities.
close do you think the B races need to be to A races to be productive?
I think it
Like
depends on the distance.
what should athletes look for when they're choosing a B race?
Probably 8 to 12 weeks out,
Uh-huh.
depending on the length.
Mhm.
If it's shorter, marathon, 50K, you can get up closer to your long race, assuming that race is up in 100 miles. Like, let's talk about it in those terms,
Yeah.
since my race is 100 miles. The more experienced you are and the more you know about how well you recover, you can push up those distances closer to your race.
Yeah.
But if those distances are less familiar, you haven't done them as much, you're not as experienced of an athlete, they should be done further out from the race to allow for more recovery time
Yeah.
and a longer runway for more specific training into the A race.
Yep.
But I do think it's important to kind of go through that checklist and ask yourself, like, what does this what is this B race allowing me to do? So we already talked about the nutrition, the mental performance, and some of the race strategies
Yeah.
and the process oriented goals that I'll be trialing at this race based on what I've already done in my training and to see where the gaps are so I can improve on that for Run Rabbit in September. There's also the idea of like terrain technicality, making sure that you spend a long day on similar terrain that you're going to be on at the race. This is somewhat comparable, somewhat similar altitude. And for me, this is the gateway to go back to Leadville.
Yeah.
So it has a bit of an
purpose.
outcome purpose for me too.
Yeah.
So that's
You
really
want to get a gold coin to go back to Leadville.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to recognize with the B race, you aren't going to be training as specifically for this event as you are your A race because it's coming within the runway and the build up for that A race.
Yeah.
So, there's some nuances about Silver Rush that are different from Run Rabbit. Like there's a lot more runnable terrain.
Yeah.
And so like I've done a little bit of balancing technical mountain running and runnable terrain in the context of my training, but I haven't done all specific for Silver Rush.
Right. I think, some things to think about is like at the end of the day, fitness is fitness. So building fitness for your B event will be helpful for your A event. What becomes like less useful is like, I wouldn't use like a, like a super flat, fast A, or actually it would be suboptimal to use like a flat, fast ultra to train for like a steep mountain 100. It does still build fitness, so it's not the worst. So if like I had an athlete running a flat, fast, like looped 50K to train for like UTMB hard rock type thing, it's not ideal, but it's like fine because it's still building fitness.
Right.
What is like maybe less productive is doing like a super steep technical, like sort of slow race to get ready for a fast race. That's not super ideal.
Right. Like those things aren't a great fit for each other. So I
Yeah.
think it's important that athletes contextualize those things. Like, how does this one race fit into the context of the next race? I know for me that doing some more running is going to lead me to likely run more of the uphills at Rabbit, which is a big growth edge for me in my personal development.
For everyone
I know,
who does
right?
this sport.
Like all of us are trying to get better on the hills.
Maybe Killian's the only person that's like, I don't know, I feel like I'm pretty good at these. This feels easy for me. This is fine.
I'm not too worried about the climbs. Good for you, Killian.
Could be steeper.
And
Must be nice.
I think the other thing to recognize here, and maybe last point on this before we move over to our running myths, is that we try to race the B race in a way that doesn't leave you recovering for longer than you need.
Yes.
So a couple things that really help, and these were good reminders from my coach when we talked late last week about this race, was like how you fuel in the last hour of this race will jumpstart your recovery process. How quickly you start refueling after the race will help with your recovery process. And also making sure to try not to go to the well for any specific outcome that you want to achieve. So I have a few outcomes. I'd like to go under 7 hours at this race and get a PR. The last time I did this race was 3 years ago. I ran it in 7 hours and 18 minutes. I'd like to try to dip under that 7 hour mark without going into the well to not sacrifice my training. Now, for some folks, running a 50 miler is going to push you to closer to your limit.
Right. Well, so for context, you first raced Silver Rush in like
9 hours.
2017?
2017 and 9
2017.
hours.
So like, 8 years ago. The more you do this sport, what I'm saying is like the more that you accumulate work and experience in this sport, the more information you have about your recovery and the sort of more freedom you have. I think that like with newer athletes, it's always a little like there's always that unknown of like how well are you going to recover? How much time and space do we need after? So I think that like, again, that's just why we say like, hey, if you want to be good at this, all you have to do is do it for like a few decades. Easy, done.
Right.
But it really is true. Like it's the better, like the more you practice, the more you advance in your mastery of the sport, the more helpful the strategy becomes with time too. And the more information you have to better execute on the strategy. I think that like, especially for more beginner ultra athletes, we obviously never want folks like, for a B race, definitely don't go to the well. But I also don't want athletes running it sort of from the perspective of like, oh, I could quit or, oh, I could walk it in because this isn't the number one goal. I sort of want them to like suspend their disbelief for a day and go all in on that, but also without going to the well. Like commit to having like to learning the lessons of that day. And I think that for me, I always encourage athletes in their B events to have a growth day over a good day. Like if we need to go learn a hard lesson about nutrition, hydration, fitness, let's learn it in the dress rehearsal and not on game day.
Yeah. And sometimes, honestly, I think that's such a good point. Maybe final point on this, Zoe, is sometimes that B race not going to plan is
very helpful,
more helpful than you nailing it. Because it will help give you the opportunity to see that you can work through challenges. And when you do step up to that A race, hopefully it is a race that is going to involve a lot of challenge. It's going to be really hard because that's, again, where the growth is. But if you can see in training that you've done that, you're much more likely to rise up and see that you're capable of more on the big day itself, which is that A race.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's talk about the 5 worst running myths that hold athletes back.
Yeah, let's go.
So, I think that these are like the 5 things that we see athletes do that sabotage their progress. So if you're not getting fitter, you're not getting faster, you're stagnating, regressing, or just not improving the way that you want to. I feel like it's one of these 5 things that's usually behind it. But I also want to know what our listeners think the 5 worst myths are. So comment on the video, on the Spotify, send us an email, let us know what myth you've fallen for.
Let's bust up some myths. No pain, no gain. Myth number one. So why is this popular?
Well, it's kind of old school running advice that's been handed down for decades, and it's sort of been seen as a badge of mental toughness, or sort of like, I mean, especially in the US, our our relationship to exercise, I think, has always been like kind of like colored by our puritanical roots, and people have the sense of like, if this doesn't feel bad, then it must not be working. I think especially for beginner runners, where like, yeah, like starting to run does feel not good necessarily, but as you progress in running, or if you want to progress, we know that in order to get faster and fitter, you have to learn to run easy. So teaching people that like you don't have to go balls to the wall, you don't have to break a sweat, and in fact that is the most productive thing you can do for your aerobic development, I think can sometimes be a really big learning curve for folks.
Yeah, totally. So just remember that chronic pain often signals injury risk, and normalizing that can lead to overtraining or sidelining injuries.
Yep.
We need stress to be productive.
Yes.
And so that means we also need to learn to rest. We have to have training that's polarized.
Yep.
We have to have days that are very hard, that push us, that create fatigue, that make us tired. And then we also have to have days that are very, very easy so we can stay consistent. This is so important for a sport like running, where the neuromuscular adaptations and the biomechanical processes are really key. So like a rest day, although we do want to take like usually one full rest day a week, if
Yep.
not two, depending on how far along in this process you are. If we don't have some of those easy days where you're just running very, very slowly, we don't develop those neural pathways. So there's a lot of nuance in this process that's important. But if you over index on making it hard all the time,
Stay hard.
stay hard. If you're David Goggins, likely you're going to end up like him, which was having a lot of really tough injuries.
We've both run faster than him at Silver Rush and Leadville, just for context. You're looking at two people who are faster than David Goggins.
Wow.
Shots fired.
Shots fired.
I think that what is always like, this is something that takes experience, but we always want athletes to learn the difference between pain and discomfort, because it is true that you are not going to progress as an athlete unless you learn to understand and embrace discomfort. That doesn't mean embracing pain, right? Like there's a difference between running, like at the end of an ultra, like, yeah, it's not going to feel comfortable, but that's going to feel different than like running on a stress fracture. And one of those things you want to listen to, and one of those things you want to like thank the sensation, but move through it. And I think that, it can be really tough learning to really learn to read and decipher your body's signals. But something I always like to say is like, learn to listen to your body when it's whispering, so you don't have to hear it when it's screaming. And also learning to be okay sitting with some amount of discomfort in your training and moving through it, right? Like if you never trained through discomfort, like, I mean, you have to train through productive fatigue or potentially productive discomfort. Like maybe your muscles are a little bit sore from a particular training stimulus, or adding in strength training. You don't want things to be like very uncomfortable all of the time, but if things are never a little bit uncomfortable, that means you're not growing. That means you do not have enough stress to produce a positive training stimulus response.
And I think like one of the keys to navigating this is making sure that you schedule regular recovery weeks or deload weeks, and you do that proactively, or you get very, very good at responding to stress as it occurs. I think this is one of the things that most athletes struggle with the most, is letting go of their training when life's happenings are starting to kind of cloud up the system and create stress, and then move the athlete into a situation where now more training stress is going to become unproductive. I see athletes a lot in my coaching practice needing to develop that tool over time. So, the proactive recovery weeks or deload weeks can be very, very beneficial for those folks who like haven't quite gotten to the place where they're like, you know what, I see all these things happening. I've been here before. That means tomorrow I got to just like make that really easy, or take an extra rest day, shift that workout a day or 48 hours.
Yep. Yeah. So I think big takeaways here are learn the difference between normal discomfort and effort versus pain that's not productive for your training. And screw, like, I feel like all of the sayings that you see on like gym bro posters at the local like Planet Fitness. All of that is terrible advice. Ignore all of that.
All right. Myth number 2, more miles always makes you faster. Why is this popular, Zoe?
Well, I also feel like anytime athletes see the words always or never or anything that like isn't caveated and feels overly generalized, that should always raise your skepticism. But high mileage is still glorified and super popular in a lot of corners of training culture. You know, a lot of us are used to seeing elites running over 100 miles a week, and it can be easy to assume that more always means better, particularly when you sort of add fuel to the fire in the form of social media and Strava feeds, which can add to the pressure by making mileage totals feel like the ultimate badge of commitment or the ultimate like benchmark for training success.
And this is pretty harmful because running more miles than your body can absorb leads to cumulative fatigue without proportional fitness gains. So you're going to get tired and you're not going to actually get faster or fitter. And mileage, for mileage sake alone, often just creates gray zone training. Days are too hard when they should be easy. Easy days, we need them to build more speed over time so we can get some neuromuscular adaptations, and everything kind of just gets jumbled up, and none of it is polarized, which limits aerobic development, and it reduces the quality of our workouts and increases risk of burnout, more overuse injuries, hormonal disruption, especially in athletes who aren't adequately fueling. So this can become really, really problematic.
Yeah. So another, I think like a sub myth here is the 10% rule, which is like, I think if you don't have a coach and you're just getting started, only increase your mileage by 10% week to week. I guess that's not like the worst. Like it's not the most harmful, but it's also just like not scientifically a thing. Your ramp rate, or how much you can increase volume by without it meaningfully or without deleteriously increasing your injury risk, so much more has to do with your baseline, right? Like
Right.
you and I both train higher volume, and we can increase by like more than 10%. And if we could only increase by 10%, that would be extremely slow going. So it's so much more about your training background, consistency, and other life factors. Again, I feel like if you see that 10% rule thing, like that's really not nuanced enough to capture the full complexity here.
Yeah, I think also, Zoe, a good point to make here is that key performance predictors like lactate threshold and running economy actually respond better to specific workout types rather than just stacking a bunch of easy miles.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, again, go back and listen to our episode we did a couple weeks ago about hybridized versus block periodization. Rather than just looking at mileage, I think it's so important to look at training structure, stress distribution, and how all of that fits in with your life. Like if you are maybe you're an older athlete, maybe you have like a higher stress life where you're more time limited. There are times where adding in volume will absolutely not make you faster, and it's much better to focus on quality over just quantity. However, yes, we also do want to build volume in a smart and strategic way over time. So it's sort of this thing of volume is a important tool to have in our toolbox, right? Like we don't want to ignore it. It would not be accurate to say it's not helpful, but it's so much more context dependent than just always, always, always focus on building that volume. Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about structure specifically.
A few things, because we've hit on a lot of this on previous podcasts. So it'd be a good opportunity for folks who are maybe just joining us on this journey to go back and listen to a few of these things, because there's some common debates, or there's some things that we have to look at the nuance between the benefits of one approach versus another. So one of these things is going to be measuring your training stress by time and effort rather than miles, or miles versus time, effort, duration, etc. We also want to talk about why structure beats total mileage. So that example of how are we concentrating our stress in a week
Yep.
How much stress do we have? How much recovery do we have between those sessions?
And I can't remember the name of the study, but we cited it on an episode a couple weeks back that looked at the primary predictor of training injury was not just mileage, but it was actually stress distribution, right? Like
Right.
how you distribute the stress, like how you structure your training, how you allocate that training matters even more than just like how much training are you doing.
Exactly. Like, how polarized is the training? Are we doing
And
back-to-back long runs?
I
Are
know
we
this
doing
sounds like so intuitive, but again, studies show that like less than 10% of recreational runners have a coach. 90% of people, I guess, are maybe not doing this, but the biggest predictor of training or of injury in this one study was, does this person follow a structured training program?
right?
And that not following a structured training program increased your injury risk by 68%. That is huge. Like,
Right.
if there was a pill that we could sell that decreased injury risk by 68%, we would be the richest people on earth. We do have that pill. It's called training.
It's called coaching.
It's called coaching.
I do think also one more point here and why structure beats total mileage is because how we structure intensity within a build really matters. Are we starting with the shortest interval duration first and finishing with the longest? Are we starting with the longest first and finishing with the shortest duration later in the build? Are we doing randomized? Because randomized, you have a much lower percentage of gains to be made. And when you start at a lower interval length and go to a higher, or start at a higher and go to a lower and follow a structured progression, you actually gain more fitness in those periods. So anything random really isn't backed up by a lot of research, not very helpful. We also have this 80-20 principle. So 80% of your weekly training should be at least easy or conversational effort, zone 1 and zone 2, to develop the aerobic engine, and 20%, probably even less for most athletes, should be at intensity. So threshold or VO2 max as like two very simplified ways to look at intensity. And you want to also consider tie your mileage to your goals and your capacity. Yep. So your training volume should align with your goal events. 5Ks versus 100 milers is like two very polar opposite examples here. You don't need to train like you would for a 100 miler for a 5K. The volume is probably not going to be the same, even for our most advanced athletes. And consistency matters more than peaks of high mileage. So how consistently are you putting that work in?
Yeah.
How often are you above your floor? How well are you doing?
And do you know where your floor is?
Right. So all of this stuff, really, really important. The bottom line here is mileage is a tool. It's not the goal itself. So if you're increasing those things, it needs to be considered within an overall structured plan and progression that's right for you. And smart training programs are going to always prioritize time and effort and purpose-driven workouts to create sustainable, progressive improvement. And, not bragging rights on Strava or something like that.
Yeah. All right. Myth number 3. You need perfect running form.
Why is this popular?
So I think a lot of this is to blame on social media and or like the running book industrial complex. And we live in a visual culture where these like slow-mo videos of the ideal stride rack up likes on social media and get featured in training blogs. And it's also like, think of like the barefoot running craze, the chi running phase, the pose run. Like there's so many different like methods, forms, like whatever formulations, and like none of it is backed by robust evidence. A lot of shoe brands, and like, I think this all goes to just like, it's much easier to sell people things if you tell them their form is not good.
Right.
So I think the caveat here is like the evidence shows that most likely, if you're progressing at a reasonable rate and you're not like repeatedly injured, whatever your running form is likely good for you. It's likely that's the most efficient. There can be some like, I would say like less than 1% of cases, you might need to do some stride or gait retraining if you have like a really bad biomechanical pattern that's leading to repeated injury risk. That would be something worth assessing with a professional, not just like some rando that you found on TikTok. But yeah, the evidence suggests that however you run is the best running form for you. Our bodies are different. The way that I run will look different than the way you run. And I think that like it's intuitive to think there might just be like one correct way to run, but that's just not how human bodies actually work. So trying to force your body into an arbitrary, rigid idea of the perfect form actually can make athletes tense up, and that can actually lead to less efficient movement, increased injury cost, and actually even increase your chance of injury.
Yeah, we really need to be careful of over focusing on details like foot strike or hip rotation while you run distant. While you run, it can distract you from cues that matter more, like effort, relaxation, and rhythm. And also, runners who believe they must match a specific like stride rate or stride type can develop anxiety about their movement. So that can lead to a lot less joy in this process.
Yes, let's talk a little bit about what the science actually says about running, stride, and gait. Research on elite runners shows huge variability in biomechanics. Top performers don't all land the same way or have identical arm carriage, but they do share one key trait. They're efficient at their own natural stride. And that's the key differentiator there. There was actually a 2017 review in Sports Medicine that found there's no single optimal stride pattern, and instead, efficient form adapts to individual anatomy, strength, mobility, and speed. So studies actually show self-selected stride patterns tend to minimize metabolic cost, which means that runners will actually just naturally settle into the most efficient gait for them. Forcing changes in foot strike or in other aspects of form without addressing underlying issues like potentially weakness or tightness can actually raise your injury risk by disrupting the neuromuscular patterns that your body has already optimized.
So let's train smarter, guys, and focus on the bigger picture. Maintain a slight forward lean from the ankles, not bending at the waist. Keep your shoulders relaxed and arms swinging naturally. Tension is going to waste energy, and prioritize quick, light cadence. 70 to 180 is about the average. It's better to do this rather than like plodding or long pounding strides.
Mhm.
But note that stride rate can also be really personal.
Yeah, and it's so much more due to your anatomy. The like you need to shoot for exactly 180 is a sort of sub myth of this myth. But I think that let's talk a little bit about like how strength mobility and drills can be more helpful than just like watching a shit ton of TikTok videos and then yelling at yourself while you got on your jog. So I would really focus like build your foundations, and then as your body gets stronger and fitter, assume it will do what is best for it. So if you work on strengthening your core, hips, and your calves, that'll really work to support stable, controlled movement. And that is the foundation of good running form. So you can also work on improving ankle, hip, and thoracic spine mobility, which will allow for smoother motion without having to consciously fix your stride. So I like athletes to use drills like high knees, skips, and strides to improve mechanics naturally, allowing form to evolve as your fitness and neuromuscular control improve. So it's sort of a top-down approach.
I love that. And I think the bottom line here is that there is no universal perfect form. Okay. Efficient running looks a little different for every athlete. And don't force changes. Build strength, build mobility, grow into your stride and make it as efficient as you possibly can. And this is going to probably be the best way for you to, one, enjoy running for a long period of time, be more injury resilient, and more comfortable in the process.
All right. Myth number 4, carbs are bad.
Yeah, carbs make you slow or fat was actually the title of this slide here. So
I mean, I hear that and like again, like this is my raison d'etre. If you're interested in more diet nutrition content, check out the Your Diet Sucks podcast that I host with registered dietitian nutritionist Kylie Van Horn. But this is huge because I think carbs are the most demonized macronutrient throughout history, and diet trends that have put carbs down, especially like most recently keto, paleo, low carb, high fat, have
the ancestral diet of the Liver King.
Yeah, the Liver King diets have seeped into endurance culture. And this is super harmful because carbs are the body's main energy source during moderate to hard efforts. Restricting them will reduce glycogen availability, it will increase injury risk, and it will tank your performance.
I mean, it's just straight up. I mean, it could not be any more direct than that.
Yep.
And
there is no proven benefit to cutting out carbohydrates, particularly for endurance athletes.
Studies repeatedly show endurance athletes perform best on high carb diets. Low carb diets often impair performance and recovery, and they make you less efficient at burning fat while exercising.
Yes.
So don't do it.
So we do want to be both efficient at utilizing fat and utilizing carbohydrates as fuel. But the best way to get efficient at burning fat is to just do aerobic based training, not to limit carbohydrates. There was a really great high quality study that came out about a year and a half ago that showed that in elite cyclists, when they reduced their carbohydrate intake, it did nothing to improve their ability to oxidize fat.
It actually made it worse after 48 hours of restriction.
Yes.
There was a slight uptick on, I think it was in the first 24 hours. And then after that, their ability to burn fat while exercising was significantly reduced.
Yeah. So restricting your carbs will, there used to be this thought that if you restrict carbohydrate intake, it'll force your body to burn fat as fuel, therefore making it more efficient at doing that. And that did not happen. And I think this is particularly harmful when we look at female athletes, because studies show that even small within day energy deficits, just 200, 300 calories, like less than a Cliff Bar, being in that much of a calorie deficit, dramatically increased their risk of bone injury. And there was another study that showed in female athletes, even when they were meeting their overall energy needs, if they weren't meeting specifically their carbohydrate needs, that dramatically increased their risk specifically of bone injury. So you need to be so diligent and intentional about making sure that you're meeting your carbohydrate needs.
So two key points on this. How do we train smarter? Prioritize carb intake around your workouts. Target 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates an hour in longer runs, so runs of more than 90 minutes, and choose familiar, easily digestible carbs during those efforts and during your races.
Yeah. And listen to our episode about carbohydrate periodization if you want to learn a little bit more about how to really optimize your carbohydrate intake.
All right, myth number 5, our final myth. Thanks for being with us all the way through to the end. Stretch before every run to prevent injury.
Oh, this is an oldie but a goodie.
Why is this popular?
Well, for decades, gym classes, sports teams, and outdated training books taught static stretching as the default way to warm up. So you see images of athletes holding toe touches or quad stretches, which sort of became synonymous with serious preparation. And some ideologies still equate flexibility with injury prevention, and they assume that more static stretching, getting your muscles loose before activity, makes them safer, which is not validated by the evidence.
So this is harmful because holding static stretches before a run can temporarily decrease muscle strength, power, and speed. And studies show reductions of 3 to 8% in explosive strength after prolonged static stretches. And static stretching also elongates muscles, but doesn't increase body temperature or prime your nervous system for running. So it fails to prepare you for the demands of fast or technical movement.
So what you're hearing is don't do static stretching. What you're not hearing is don't warm up. You should do a warm up. So nice dynamic movements. So like leg swings, maybe a lunge matrix, high knees, butt kicks, maybe a grapevine, because that's going to reinforce those neuromuscular pathways. So like teaching your body, doing the movements that you will employ in running so that your brain communicates with your muscles better, and also increasing the joint fluid, the fluid in your joints, kind of just lubing things up before you get going.
Love that.
Yep. And just getting things ready to go in a more dynamic way. So it's not just like stretching a rubber band out. You're actually just like preparing different parts of the system.
And I think that's why dynamic stretching is really great here. I know that's part of our Train Smarter category here. I don't want to do a spoiler alert, but just tell us really quick what the science says about this.
Yeah, so there was a 2011 review that found no evidence that static stretching before exercise reduced injury risk. And on the contrary, it can actually blunt your neuromuscular performance, again, because you're not reinforcing the actual neuromuscular patterns that you'll employ in your running stride. Multiple studies have shown that dynamic warm-ups, which involve moving through a joint's range of motion, increase muscle temperature, activate motor units, and improve coordination. And all of those things are actually key for reducing injury likelihood and enhancing performance.
Also, static stretching does have some value for improving flexibility or addressing specific tightness, but it's best reserved for post-run or separate mobility work when the goal is recovery and increasing range of motion, not priming for the activity you're about to do.
Yeah, so replace static stretching with a dynamic warm up and use movements that mimic running mechanics to increase heart rate, improve blood flow, and activate muscles. So, things that I like to do are those leg swings, walking lunges with torso twists, skips or high knees, or short accelerations or strides at controlled efforts.
After your run, or you can do some static stretching. I think that's helpful. It can be a great little recovery period. You can do a mobility session. That static stretching can help, improve your general flexibility, especially in areas that are prone to tightness, hip flexors, hamstrings, calves. Holding for 20 to 60 seconds is kind of what's recommended, and focusing on relaxation and really breathing into your range of motion.
Yeah.
Pretty simple. We don't have to get too crazy with the post-run mobility or static stretching.
Yeah, but individualize your warm up. If you have old injuries or mobility limitations, work on integrating sport specific activation drills like glute bridges or calf raises that address your specific needs, not that just like loosen shit up willy nilly. And also note that your dynamic warm up does not have to be long and it does not have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Do what feels good. You don't have to do some giant, big, Baroque mobility routine that you found on Instagram. Just a couple minutes can be enough to reduce your injury risk and to enhance performance.
All right. So some takeaways from today. These myths persist because they're easy sound bites. They're silver bullet-y, and people like that. But
and you can sell shit.
Yeah, you can sell your shit.
You can sell that stretching routine. You can sell your ketone product that doesn't actually contain ketone esters, that just actually contains ketone precursors. You can sell your diet plan. There's a lot of things you can sell. You can sell your chi running method. Oh, these myths can move product.
They are, but they're also out of alignment with modern sports science.
Yep.
So just start training smarter. Reject these outdated ideas. Embrace principles that support your health and consistency. Even small changes in these areas, like with the carbohydrates specifically, or adding in dynamic warm-ups instead of doing static stretching, could really, really help improve your health overall when repeated consistently over time.
So we want to know what myths you've maybe struggled with, or which one was most surprising for you. So shoot us a DM, get in the comments section, let us know, shoot us an email, microcosmcoaching@gmail.com. We want to hear from you. We want to answer your listener questions, and we'd love to hear your story.
Yeah.
Join our community if you are into more myth busting and evidence-based principles to guide your training and running. Hit us up on at microcosmcoaching@gmail.com or microcosm-coaching.com.
All right. See you guys next week.